That's the perfect look right there.
Cheers, it's coffee time. Yeah.
All right, guys. Hey, welcome to another episode of Inquiring Minds. I am Steve Harper, and with me is my amazing co-host, Donna Carlin, who, after I just made a comment, might want to kill me today. I'm not sure. How are you doing today, Donna?
Fine. I have 4 hockey pucks lined up to throw at you. The problem is it would just hit my screen and break it probably. But,
yeah, that would not be good. That would not be good. So we'll just have to meet up in person so you can, dole out the punishment.
It's been too long for sure.
It has been too long. We've got to remedy that. But we were just talking actually before we clicked record for this episode how great a response we're getting from our listeners and how much people are really enjoying the show and really leveraging these topics and these questions that we've been putting on the table. And it's just such a rewarding experience for us to hear that feedback and to know that people are really gaining some really great perspectives because of these conversations. So super excited to be doing this with you.
And they should also know, because people have asked me this, there's absolutely no prep. We do not speak to each other other than a business-related call or a coaching-related call in between our podcast calls. And
well, let's clarify. We do speak to each other. Like, I don't want them to think we don't know each other or we're not friends. Yeah. Because I can see I can see why Donna wouldn't want to talk to that guy.
Okay, that's like 2 hockey pucks right there. So, no, we speak to each other. We don't discuss the podcast ahead of time. And what's so cool is I read a ton and I interact with so many people in different fields of practice that when they say something that's a gem or I read something that's a gem, I go, oh, 1 minute, I got to write this down. This is what I'm throwing at Steve on Wednesday because that's when we were taping. And so until this very moment, he's not going to know what we're going to be discussing because I'm throwing it out at him and then we just go with it. So if we go off on a tangent or whatever else, that's because there's no script. We just percolate on topics and ideas and perspectives and always invite your 3 cents and input because we would love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
what are we talking about today?
Yeah, we're going to start off with when you follow the same path as everyone else, you're just a number. And I get this question from everyone else. I need to apply or want to apply for a new job or change careers or whatever else. I'm just a number. Like there's so many different platforms to apply for work and everything else.
Sure.
I'm just one of many. My resume has to fit what it is. So I always say to people, there's something unique about you, your unique contribution based on your personality, your experience, your training, all of that, that's going to be absolutely unique to you. So even in your resume, how are you sharing a story that talks about not only achievements, but brings a piece of your personality in there? Because when you're a category of 1 because it's all your unique contributions. You can't help but stand out. So don't be 1, be the only. So, who was it? Richard Bach said, argue for your limitations, and sure enough, they're yours. So if you argue for everything that you can't do or aren't or don't measure up to be or whatever, that's who you will be because it's going to come across in every conversation, every piece of written correspondence. There's going to be caveats galore. How can you be your unique self? And I'm going to ask you this question for you because your contribution, you had that concept of ripple way back when like even, I can't even go back that far. So at least 15 years, I would think. And what a ripple effect brings. Now that's for action, there's a ripple effect. For conversation, there's a ripple effect. For interaction, relationship, everything else that you do, there's a ripple effect. And what you did is not only talk about ripple effect, but you inserted yourself in the story of what is my ripple of the day? What is my ripple in my work? And you live by it. That is unique to you. I mean, you're the king of ripplers, right? So what was it that helped you see that this was your unique contribution to the world?
Oh, that's a really good question, and I appreciate it. It actually came from really being a number. Really, at the end of the day, in all
Yeah.
honesty, I really did not give myself a whole lot of credit for being all that unique or having that big of an impact in the world. And when I first started to write my book and was really kind of motivated to to start on this concept, even before we put the framework of the ripple together, I was working with a guy that was editing at the time, and he said, "You know, what made you unique as an entrepreneur?" Because originally the book was going to be for sales professionals. It was really designed to be, hey, if you were going to get into the profession of selling. One of the things that I had seen over my entrepreneurial career and having a wide variety of experience in working with a good number of salespeople was many of them get into that profession for the wrong reasons. They see the fancy cars, they hear the big money, but they don't realize at the end of the day, career longevity really comes down to the relationships that they build with their clients. And that was something that I really tapped into that I ended up having as a special skill set. So when I started off, I wanted to write a how-to manual for organizations, you know, that were hiring salespeople to help them understand the approach that it wasn't transaction, it was about relationship. And then I hit a roadblock because I was really starting to think, you know, what I was writing and what I was putting out there was kind of like everybody else and really didn't have anything all that special to bring to the table. But my editor at the time said, you know, what made you a successful entrepreneur? And I said, well, for me, I really have this servant heart. I really want to be able to help people. And a lot of times where I would help people had nothing to do with what I was doing professionally. I just kept my ears and, you know, my ears open, my eyes peeled, and looked for ways to contribute and add value. I said, it's kind of like the ripple effect, right? You toss that stone in the pond, it creates a ripple. And what happens is you're actually making an indelible mark on in hearts and minds when you do that. And he said, that's what you are. You're the ripple guy, right? You have always done that as long as I've known you. And so it gave me a completely different framework at that time. And I have to give credit where credit is due. I had not given myself even a passing courtesy to recognize that what I was doing and how I was doing it was uniquely different. I felt like I was just one of those numbers. And so I feel like you have to have those revelations in your life and in your career that, you know, you really, whether somebody like a coach or a good friend or a family member or just someone you respect and admire points out what you really bring to the table, what makes you unique. You have to really lean into that. And we have this tendency we've talked about on other episodes to, oh no, that's nothing. It's, you know, we dismiss it a lot of times. That's when your ears really need to perk up because that's something that somebody recognizes in you, a special skill or talent or ability. And for me, that was a wake up call to say, you know, everything that I do, everything that we all do, just like you said, has a ripple effect. You know, the decisions that we make, how we treat people, the relationships we want to get engaged in, the ways we treat our clients, the approaches we want to take for building our businesses, everything that we do on a consistent, everyday basis has a ripple attached to it. So I choose to focus on how to create the most positive outcomes I can in every engagement, every situation. And so when I started to realize that that was my unique skill, then all of a sudden I stepped out of line and kind of formed the line on the left, you know, from everybody else and started really bringing my own flavor and persona to the world. And once I did that, it was kind of like Katie bar the door. It took a while, but at the end of it, it wasn't an overnight situation, but, and it's still an everyday process because I have a tendency to sometimes, as you know, you know, sort of belittle myself and not thinking I'm not doing enough. But there really is that I can always hold on to in those moments of self doubt that I am unique and I've got a special skill and talent and I want to share it with the world. And so for that perspective, you know, this topic is very timely because it's a good reminder to everybody to find that one thing that you bring to the table and really, really go all in. You know, figure out how to, you know, shine that light on your skill set, your talent, and know that you do it different than anybody else can do it, which makes it really awesome and unique when you can, you know, recognize that.
Isn't it cool when
It
you
is.
come to that realization? It's interesting. A lot of introspection. I was recently asked about the trajectory of my career and looking at how each thing that happened to me, each experience that life threw at me, helped shape where I took it and how I used it to fuel change or fuel my career. And I was always uh, the only, if you look at it from that
Hmm.
perspective. I was never one of many, because I would literally focus on what do I have? What have I accomplished that other people haven't done in the same combination? And I look at that, it's connecting the dots to the nth degree, I guess. I remember even years ago when my son Michael had his first surgery, even though it was in Canada, in another province, we still had to pay the differentiation between the provinces because you were going to Quebec for the surgery, and so we ended up paying money, and then she moved to the States. So there's a difference between paying $3,000 for exploratory and reconstructive surgery, and then $150,000 because she moved to the States. There
Yeah.
you go with the difference, even
She
in,
meaning the
in
doctor that you were
the
working with.
doctor.
Yeah.
And she was the only one in the world. We had to follow her.
Yeah.
And what was interesting was the health insurance plan for our province said, so put in an application for why we should fund an out of country procedure. So I did, and then I got back, well, we have a surgeon that could do an exploratory. We have a surgeon that does this, a surgeon that does that. And I said, you don't have a surgeon that does it all in a specific way to get a different outcome,
Hmm.
because she was the only one in the world. So I said, you don't do things piecemeal. You don't go to a dentist and you have one person clean your teeth and then another person examine your teeth and then one do half a filling and then the other one do the polishing. It doesn't work that way. She has come up with her own methodology to address this kind of paralysis. You have to do it all. And if you fund this, you have to fund subsequent surgeries. So what I did was I showed them why she is unique and not one of many that could do little bits and pieces of everything. I said, there's not one surgeon who could do everything that she does because she invented it.
Yeah.
And you're not putting his health at risk. You're just not doing that. He was, I guess, two by the time it was time for surgery number two. So there you go. It's the same thing for me. You could say that I could do coaching because you coach for the federal government, for example, and you have to meet the criteria and the statement of work and all this kind of stuff that thousands across the country could qualify for. I'm the shadow coach to do the shadow coaching methodology. Other people can't say they do it if I didn't train them,
Hmm.
because it's trademarked, it's a copyrighted methodology, and if they apply, it's fraudulent. They can't do it. So if my client says I want somebody to do shadow coaching with me, I'm it.
Yeah.
So they could sole source me. So there you go. Even in a sea of tens of thousands of coaches worldwide, there's a handful of us that are actually certified in shadow coaching because I certified them.
Yeah.
So there you go. What is it that you do that's unique to you? And we could go on and on and on about, even how I started my companies, because somebody identified my unique contribution and said, work for yourself, don't work for somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
So are you having those conversations? I'm asking our audience, with people around you who see your unique contributions and say, why are you working for somebody else? Or why aren't you working in this capacity for somebody else when you do this so well?
Yeah, and I would actually challenge our audience to, if you're not hearing that, it maybe ask.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I think that's I have noticed that we're as a you know society not very good at paying compliments or putting recognition where recognition is due, and you're not fishing for a compliment. You're not fishing for someone to blow smoke up your skirt, right? But at the end of the day, you're looking for someone who has their perspective, their opinion, and asking the question, what do you see in me that makes me unique? Or what do you see in me that, talent or skill that maybe I should be looking at a little closer, or figuring out how to go out and do something on my own with, right? A
Yeah.
colleague, even a boss or a manager will most likely always have an answer, because they are subconsciously, everybody recognizes these things, right? And they may not verbalize it, they may not always vocalize it, but when you actually enlist their help to figure out what makes me not blend in with the rest of the crowd, not just be a number, because this is something that's important to me. I'd like to know, because I'd like to get some outside perspective and opinion on this. It's amazing where those conversations will open up, and exactly what you'll discover people's impressions are. And I I challenge the leaders that I work with to be doing this all the time, not only with their executive teams, but at every level of the organization. And by doing so, they see not only the things that everybody sees in their skill sets, but also maybe some things that they're dismissing, much like I was dismissing in what I was doing early on in my career. That really became my sort of my superpower, and how I connect people, how I get those conversations started, how I recognize the really unique value in each of these people, but then I find a connection thread between the two, and have kicked off many a great business partnerships and many a great friendships and relationships because of those introductions. But I never thought that was very unique or special until it was really pointed out to me. So enlisting the help of your own network, so to speak, to help you identify those things can be very, very useful. I mean, look at us. I mean, we're on our entrepreneurial paths that we are today predominantly because we took the time to actually sort of embrace what other people saw in us. And we didn't let that just kind of die on the vine like a lot of people tend to do.
That's it. It takes guts. It takes courage to course correct
Yep.
or to go down a different path. There's no question whatsoever. And you look at companies that do, what's the term, destructive constructionism, where you've got a product or a service that is just a signature of your company, and all of a sudden it's no more, and the your customer base has a fit because they loved what it was that you had, and you decided to highlight a different product or a different service by pivoting. And just because they loved what you did in the past so much, they want to give it a shot and support you in doing that.
Yeah.
And when you're a human being, it's really hard because people say, I have to make a living. I don't want to jeopardize the money that's coming in. It could be a yes and conversation, not an either or. How do you integrate what your unique strength is or your unique talent into your everyday? Or how do you do both? How do
Yep.
you have your vocation fund your avocation?
Yeah.
Until you can do a shift that is much more gentle on the system, kind of thing. It's really interesting. People say to me, "What's next?" Because that I'm not retiring. So what's next in your career? And I go, it will come to me. It will be presented to me
Yep.
because I'm always open to listening to what's out there. I can't tell you now because I can't foresee the future, but I could do what I do right now to open up the floodgates for invitations to come through, which they constantly do.
Yep.
So what is it that you're not paying attention to? That's the question that I'm posing.
Yeah. That's a good
In
question. And
yourself, and when other people say, that was amazing, thank them and say, how did that impact you? Not in what way. How did that impact you where you look at it as amazing? What if I could do it again and again? What would that look like? And help them help you co-create it.
yeah, absolutely. And I highly recommend when you do that, you ask those questions, you find your way to a pen and paper as quick as possible so that you can capture that moment, capture how that made you feel, capture all that you remember from that conversation, because you will be able to leverage that to buoy you as you move forward in those moments where self-doubt will inevitably come up. You can go back and say, okay, this was my mandate. This was my driver. This was my motivation for moving forward. It becomes a great way to do that. So we could go on and on this episode. We may have to do a follow-up because it's such a juicy topic. But, Donna, how can our listeners, whether they're tuning in through the podcast platforms, which we really, really appreciate, or they're finding us on Facebook and or YouTube for the videos, how can they get involved in this conversation, share their 3 cents?
Best way is through our Facebook group, Inquiring Minds with Donna Carlin and Steve Harper. Join the group, share your 3 cents. We'd love to hear from you, or, topics that you'd like us to discuss or go deeper with. And at the same time, I'm going to throw out a challenge to our listeners. The quote that I read, argue for your limitations, and sure enough, they're yours. I'm going to turn that around and say, argue for your strengths, talents, and uniqueness, and sure enough, they're yours.
I love that. Love that. That's awesome. A great way to end this episode for sure. Well, another great, interesting conversation. We love that feedback. So, please join us. Let us know what you think, what you took from this episode, and how you respond to Donna's challenge right there would be a great way to do that. So we will be back again with another episode of Inquiring Minds. But until then, Donna, talk to you soon.
Have a good one.